We're going to stay on the inventory topic. Our next speaker is Stefan Muetzel. He's with the Animal Sciences Group at AgResearch. He's going to be talking about methane, which is the other really important greenhouse gases that agriculture contributes to.
As introduced, I'm going to talk about not the other greenhouse gas. I'm going about a major greenhouse gas, which is for us at the moment in New Zealand, methane. I'm going to show you mainly what we have done in the inventory. What you see here is basically how we measure methane. There are various different methods. What you see here, putting an animal into a box and measuring the gas inlet and the gas output, is what is recognized as, well, they say the gold standard of methane measurements. There's a lot of other measurements which are compatible with pastoral systems as well, but they are mainly estimates, so they are either shorter measurements or you have tracer gases involved in that. But they are mainly measurement estimates, and for the inventory, because of what Stefan said, is that it's so important to have accurate values, it was decided that for the New Zealand inventory, we built these respiration chambers to get these measurements done. And the reason why we do that, you see in the next slide, where you see the greenhouse gas emissions. You have seen that slide from Liz has shown that slide as well in a different form. Half of our emissions is from agriculture. Within these agricultural emissions, 80% is methane. And methane in agriculture comes nearly exclusively from ruminant fermentation. Fermentation in the rumen. There's a little bit coming from effluent emissions, and the other methane emissions that you have in the country are hidden in this graph in the waste, in the little blue slice down there. This is landfill methane. But for inventory, we here only focus on the ruminant part, and we, as I said, we are lucky enough to have these chambers available to us to do measurements. Again, why we do that, Stefan has actually mentioned that, and I'm going only quickly over that, is that it's an accounting business. Inventory is an accounting business. So we have to have accurate numbers on what we have, on what our gains or what our losses are, so to any mitigation strategy or change in practices. And as I also mentioned already, that New Zealand is renowned. We have a very, very strong methane group, which does methane mitigation. You will hear from, actually, a lot of these people are here. And we are very innovative in that area, mainly because our profile is so unique. So what have we done for the inventory? Well, as I said, we have these respiration chambers, and we have 24 for sheep and 4 for cattle, which is, at least in the southern hemisphere, the largest unit that you find. And we have done that. We could afford to do that because New Zealand is special in another aspect, that the feed base for our ruminants is comparatively simple. We feed our ruminants pasture. On a national basis, this is the most that we feed. There are other feeds out there like brassicas, like chicory, like maize silage, but on a national level, on the basis of the percentage on the national level, it's not relevant. It's simply not enough yet to be included. May change. And other than the nitrous oxide story, where getting emission factors extremely complicated in the methane area is actually relatively simple, because the environment, my microbes, nitrous oxide is a microbial process. Methane production is a microbial process. The microbes that we are looking at live in a very constant environment. That's the rumen that's inside the animal. It's warm and moist all the time. There's no weather happening. So we have developed, over the past 10 years, country-specific methane emission factors for sheep, and we are currently developing them for cattle. It's technically not completely correct, but we are very, very close to have the values determined for cattle. And one of our main findings was, or two of our main findings I'm going to mention here is, For the sheep area, the IPCC states that young animals, young sheep, produce 20% less methane compared to old sheep. And there is some biological reasons why you can make that argument. And there were some historical measurements done, or not historical, some measurements that were done 20 years ago or so. And at the time, these were the best measurements available. And the conclusion was drawn from these measurements. Now, young sheep must produce less. Now, in the last 10 years, we have looked into sheep inventory. We have looked into whether young sheep and old sheep really differ. We used cut pasture. We used respiration chambers. We could show no. There's no difference between young and old sheep. And that has gone now, they have only one emission factor, and that has gone into the inventory, into the national inventory. The other major finding what we had out of these measurements that we did in the respiration chambers is that you will find that literature will tell you the higher the quality of a feed is, the less methane it will produce. And this is backed up by a lot of research done in Europe and in America. The higher the concentrate, amount of concentrates, like barley or soybean and wheat, fed to ruminants, the lower is the methane emission factor. And what we could show is, because a lot of models still have that linearity in it, we could show that for higher quality grass, or for higher quality, for pasture qualities, whether this is high quality spring grass or very low quality summer grass from the Hawke's Bay, it doesn't make a difference. It is always the same emission factor, which again makes our business compared to the nitrous oxide people so much easier. The only thing that drives the emission factor in ruminants appears to be how much they eat. So, or the methane emission, not the emission factor. The methane emissions is how much they eat. There is no real difference. I can't say at the moment for the two species. I can say that we didn't find anything between dairy cattle and beef cattle. No differences there to date. At the moment, what we are doing also is we are aiding other countries, mainly in the Southeast Asian area, in their attempts to develop a tier 2 or a nation-specific, country-specific emission factors. And some of our scientists, some of my colleagues are going into these countries and do all that and well, advise government, policy people and scientists on measurements, technical measurements, or the construction of an inventory, because the inventory, only half of it is the emission factors. It's an important part. The other half is what we call activity data. I need to know how much methane is produced by what animal per kilogram of feed. But on the other hand, to make a national inventory, I also need to know how many animals are there of each class, how many are sold when, and what quality or what feed are they eating at any time. And so this is the areas where we advise as well. Forward, well, I hate to say that, but I have to say, I don't think our emission factors will get any better. So what we have at the moment is, as an emission factor, really good for the current feed base. And the current feed base is pasture only. Now, if there's any changes with tropical species invading our pastures, major changes, I mean not just to a few paddocks in Northland, or environmental conditions driving change in some of the, well, let's say the dairy sector has to do more indoor dairying because of nutrient effluence, we may actually have to redo or do some more work on different feed bases. At the moment, I think our activity, not the activity data, our emission factors are really good and solid. And maybe what we look at the moment is improving these activity data, improving basically the estimates that we have on how much do these animals eat. That's the value that we basically need to come up with an inventory value. It's how much do they eat and an emission factor. And thank you for your attention.